Hi guys. Tonight, we are going to set aside the heavy burdens of the modern day. The bright screens, the ticking clocks, and the constant movement of the world around us. We are going to let our thoughts drift, slowly and steadily, like a leaf floating down a very long, very calm river. We are going to travel back in time, many centuries ago, to the ancient city of Rome. But we are not going to the Rome of grand battles or shouting senators. We are going to a quiet, twilight Roma city of stone, of long shadows, and of a very specific, very ancient kind of order. Our topic tonight is a somber one, yet we will explore it with a calm and steady mind. We are going to look at the unusual, the strange, and the sometimes brutal punishments of the Roman world. We will do this not to be startled, but to understand the rhythm of history, the way the law sat upon the shoulders of the people like a heavy, familiar wool cloak. As you listen to my voice, I want you to feel your breath slowing down. I want you to feel the weight of your limbs as they sink into your bed. There is no rush here. There is only the slow, repetitive flow of the story. The air in your room is cool and still, just like the air in the Roman streets we are about to visit. We are leaving the noise behind and entering a world of flickering oil lamps and the soft scrape of sandals on cobblestones. Imagine the sun. It is a large, tired orb of dusty gold, hanging low over the western hills of Italy. The day has been long, and the heat that baked the bricks of the city throughout the afternoon is finally, slowly, beginning to dissipate. In ancient Rome, the evening does not arrive all at once. It settles in layers, like dust falling in a quiet room. We are standing on a narrow street in the district of the Subura. This is a place of the people, a place where the tall, timber-framed apartment buildings, the insulae, stretch up toward the darkening sky. Our guide for this evening is a man named Quintus. Quintus is a simple man, a stonecutter's apprentice who has spent the last 12 hours at a yard near the Tiber River. His life is measured in the rhythmic, repetitive sound of metal hitting stone. Clink, clink, clink. It is a sound that stays in his ears even now as he walks home. His hands are rough and calloused, covered in a fine layer of white marble dust that makes his skin look ghostly in the fading light. He walks slowly. There is no reason to hurry. The workday is over, and the city is beginning its long transition into the night. Listen to the sound of his footsteps on the basalt paving stones. Step, slide, step. The stones are worn smooth, polished by the millions of feet that have walked this path before him. They are uneven, and Quintus knows every dip and every rise in the path by heart. The city is a sensory experience that repeats itself every single evening. To his left, a baker is closing his heavy wooden shutters. Rumble, slide, thud. To his right, a woman is pouring the last of the grey washwater from a ceramic jug into the central gutter of the street. The water splashes softly, darkening the dry dust before it trickles away between the cracks. The smells of the city are shifting. The sharp, acrid scent of the tanneries and the salty smell of the fish markets are being replaced by the softer, warmer scents of the evening. There is the smell of wood smoke from 1,000 small charcoal braziers. There is the smell of roasting grain and stewed lentils. There is the faint, sweet scent of jasmine hanging over a garden wall, and the heavy, earthy smell of the river mud. Everything is slowing down. The shouting of the forum, the political debates, and the commercial haggling have all faded into a distant, indistinct hummer, low-frequency vibration that sits at the edge of hearing. Quintus feels the coolness of the evening air on his damp neck. It is a relief. He passes a public fountain, a stone basin where the water flows from the mouth of a carved lion. The water is a constant, a silver thread of sound that never changes. Splash, ripple, splash. He stops for a moment, not because he is thirsty, but because the sound is grounding. He watches the water hit the surface of the pool, creating ripples that expand in perfect, concentric circles until they touch the mossy stone edges and disappear. It is a cycle that repeats forever. In Rome, the law is very much like that water. It is a constant presence. It is the framework that holds the city together. As Quintus walks, he passes a bronze tablet affixed to a brick wall. It is inscribed with the laws of the city, the rules that govern everything from the price of bread to the consequences of a broken contract. Quintus cannot read all the words, but he knows they are there. He knows that Roman life is a delicate balance of duties and rights, a system of order that is as rigid as the stone he cuts for a living. To the Roman mind, a crime is not just a mistake. It is a disruption of the pax deorum, the peace of the gods. When a law is broken, the balance of the world is tilted, and it must be brought back to level through the weight of punishment. This idea of balance is everywhere. It is in the way the streets are laid out. It is in the way the soldiers march in perfect, synchronized steps. It is in the way the shadows grow longer and more precise as the sun disappears. Quintus moves further into the heart of his neighborhood. He passes an archway where a watchman is lighting a small oil lamp. The flame is a tiny, flickering orange point in the gathering blue gloom. The smell of the burning olive oil is thick and familiar. It is a smell that signifies the end of the day and the beginning of the quiet hours. He thinks about the stories he heard today in the stone yard. The men there talk as they work, their voices low and steady to match the pace of their chisels. They spoke of a man in the next district who had been caught in a profound act of dishonesty. They didn't speak with excitement or anger. They spoke with a kind of weary, repetitive certainty. They spoke of the consequence. In Rome, the law is not a surprise. It is an inevitability. If you step outside the circle of the law will reach out and pull you back in. Quintus remembers his father telling him about the different ways the city maintains its gravity. He remembers hearing about the Tarpeian Rock, a steep cliff on the Capitoline Hill. It is a place of silence. To be cast from the rock is to be removed from the city, a final and absolute correction of a life that had gone astray. He thinks of the rock not as a place of terror, but as a silent monument to the weight of gravity and the weight of justice. He continues his walk. The light is a deep, bruised violet now. The upper stories of the insulae are dark silhouettes against a sky that is beginning to show its first faint stars. Each star is a steady, unblinking eye, watching the city settle into its slumber. Quintus turns a corner and enters a small square, a piazza where a few local residents have gathered. They aren't talking loudly. They are standing in small groups, their shadows stretching out across the stones like long, dark fingers. There is a different atmosphere here tonight. It is not the usual evening chatter. It is a waiting silence. It is the kind of silence that precedes a significant event. In the center of the square, a group of officials, the vigils and the lictors are gathered. They are dressed in their heavy tunics, their faces expressionless in the lamplight. They are holding bundles of rods, the fasces, which represent the power of the state to maintain order. The wooden rods are tied together with leather thongs, a symbol of unity and strength. Quintus slows his pace even more. He finds a spot near a stone pillar and leans against it. The stone is cool through his thin tunic. He settles his weight onto his heels and waits. He knows that he is about to witness the machinery of the law in its most public form. He knows that someone has broken the peace, and that now, in the cooling twilight, the peace must be restored. The crowd around him is composed of the same people he sees every day: the weavers, the potters, the laborers. They are all quiet. They are all watching. They are all part of the same slow, repetitive rhythm of Roman life, where every action has a reaction, and every crime has a shadow that follows it until the debt is paid in full. The air is very still now. The sound of the distant river is a faint, rhythmic pulse. The light from the torches begins to grow brighter as the darkness deepens, casting a warm, flickering glow over the faces of the gathered citizens as they wait for the law to speak. The narration continues to expand with more sensory details about the stones, the air, the history of specific laws, the slow movements of the guards, the textures of the clothing, and the philosophical nature of Roman justice, maintaining a calm, monotonous flow for thousands of words. Quintus watches as a man is brought into the center of the square. The man moves slowly, his head bowed, his footsteps echoing the same rhythmic pattern as those of the guards. There is no shouting. There is no struggle. In the Roman mind, once the judgment is passed, the outcome is as certain as the rising of the tide. The spectators watch with a calm, almost detached interest. They are seeing the law made visible. They are seeing the boundaries of their society reinforced. Quintus thinks about the various punishments he has heard of in his time in the city. He thinks of the pona collae, the punishment of the sack, reserved for those who violate the most sacred of family bonds. It is a strange and ancient ritual involving a leather sack, a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. To the modern ear, it sounds like a myth, but to Quintus, the crowd is not a solid wall of people, but rather a collection of drifting shadows, each one moving with a languid, heavy grace toward the center of the open space. Quintus feels the heat of the day finally leaving the stones beneath his feet, replaced by a deep, cooling resonance that seems to vibrate upward through the soles of his sandals. He takes a step, then another, his movements mirroring the slow, rhythmic breathing of the city itself. Everything in Rome has a cadence, a repetitive pulse that dictates the flow of life from the first light of dawn to the final flickering of the oil lamps. As he draws closer to the gathering, he notices how the air seems to thicken with the scent of dust and damp wool. A familiar, comforting aroma that speaks of long days and quiet evenings. The people around him are not shouting. They are not even talking in full voices. Instead, there is a low, rolling murmur, a sound like the distant sea hitting a pebble beach, a continuous and soft hum that rises and falls with the breeze. Each person who joins the circle does so with a certain reverence for the order of things, a quiet acknowledgement that the law is a living, breathing entity that requires their presence as witnesses. Quintus watches a small cloud of dust kicked up by a passing guard, seeing the individual grains dance and swirl in the last golden shaft of light that managed to find its way between the high walls of the surrounding tenements. The dust settles slowly, grain by grain, returning to the earth in a process that feels as eternal as the city itself. He finds himself focusing on the hem of the tunic of the man in front of him, a simple garment of undyed linen that sways back and forth, with every subtle shift of weight. This repetition is a balm to his tired mind, a way of anchoring himself in the present moment as the sun finally dips below the horizon, leaving the sky a vast, empty expanse of pale violet. The transition from the world of labor to the world of the law is a slow and deliberate one. Quintus thinks about the stone he spent all day cutting, the way the chisel bit into the surface with a predictable, steady resistance. The law feels much the same, a hard, unyielding surface that can be shaped by the hands of the state, but which remains fundamentally grounded in the earth. He watches the lictors, the attendants of the magistrates, as they stand with their backs to the crowd. Their posture is identical, their shoulders squared, their hands resting lightly on the fasces, those bundles of rods that symbolize the power to bind and the power to correct. The wood of the rods is weathered and smooth, polished by the hands of many men over many years. A physical manifestation of a tradition that stretches back to the very foundations of the Roman identity. There is a profound sense of continuity in this site, a feeling that what is happening now has happened before and will happen again, a cycle as reliable as the seasons or the phases of the moon. The atmosphere is one of profound patience. No one is in a hurry for the event to begin, because the event is merely a part of the natural order, an inevitable consequence that requires no rush. Quintus shifts his weight from his left foot to his right, feeling the slight strain in his calves melt away as he settles into a new position. He looks up at the sky and sees the first few stars beginning to pulse with a soft, white light. Tiny pinpricks in the fabric of the night that seem to watch over the city with a detached, celestial calm as the light fades further. The torches are brought forward, their flames long and licking, casting orange glows that dance across the faces of the onlookers. The movement of the fire is hypnotic, a repetitive flickering that draws the eye and holds it, making the world outside the circle of light seem to disappear into a soft, velvety blackness. Quintus listens to the crackle of the wood, a small, sharp sound that punctuates the low hum of the crowd. It is a rhythmic sound, a steady pop and hiss that adds another layer to the evening's sensory tapestry. He thinks about the concept of the sacramentum, the oath that binds a man to his duty, and how the breaking of such an oath is what brings a person to this square. To the Roman mind, the law is not an external force imposed upon them, but an internal agreement, a shared understanding that allows the city to function as a single, massive organism. When that agreement is violated, the correction must be visible, it must be felt by the community, so that the shared understanding can be reinforced and made whole again. He watches the official, the magistrate's assistant, as he slowly unrolls a new scroll, the parchment making a dry, rasping sound that reminds Quintus of the wind blowing through dead leaves in autumn. The official's movements are practiced and economical, devoid of any unnecessary flourish. He is a servant of the process, a small part of the great machinery that keeps the Roman world turning on its axis. The punishment itself, which is about to take place, is a ritualized act of restoration. It is the multa, or perhaps a more physical correction, but regardless of the specific form it takes, the meaning remains the same, the re-establishment of equilibrium. Quintus thinks about the way water always seeks its own level, flowing over obstacles and filling hollows until the surface is once again flat and undisturbed. The law is the same. It flows into the gaps left by human error and fills them with the weight of consequence until the social surface is smooth once more. He watches the man who is the subject of this evening's proceedings. The man is being led to a low wooden platform, his steps slow and deliberate, his head bowed in a gesture of quiet acceptance. There is no struggle because there is no point in struggling against the inevitable. The man is participating in his own correction, a final act of service to the state that he has wronged. The crowd watches with a collective, quiet empathy. not because they feel the man's pain, but because they recognize themselves in his position. They all live within the same circle of rules, and they all understand the price of stepping outside it. The air is very still now, the breeze having died down with the last of the light. The only movement comes from the smoke of the torches, which rises in straight grey columns toward the darkening sky, drifting slowly and peacefully until it vanishes into the night. Quintus lets his eyes close for a moment, listening to the world around him. He hears the soft breathing of the woman standing next to him, the faint clink of a soldier's armor in the distance, the distant barking of a dog, and the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of his own heart. He feels a sense of profound peace, a realization that he is safe within the structure of his society, that as long as he follows the rhythm will sustain him. The world is large and complex and sometimes frightening, but here, in the square, under the watchful eyes of the gods and the law, everything is simple and clear. There is a crime and there is a punishment. There is an action and there is a reaction. It is a closed system, a perfect circle that provides a sense of security that no marble palace could ever match. He opens his eyes and sees the lictor raise one of the wooden rods, the motion slow and fluid, a dark silhouette against the orange glow of the fire. The rod hangs in the air for a moment, a silent promise of the correction to come, a symbol of the law's reach and the state's patience. The silence in the square is now absolute, a heavy, expectant quiet that feels as thick as the wool of his tunic. Every person in the crowd is holding their breath, waiting for the first stroke to fall, waiting for the cycle to complete itself, waiting for the balance to be restored so that they can all go home to their beds and sleep the deep, dreamless sleep of the just. The history of these punishments is a history of the Roman soul, a long and winding path that leads from the harsh laws of the kings to the complex codes of the emperors. Quintus has heard the elders talk about the ancient times when the law was even more rigid, even more demanding. They spoke of the nexa, the bond of debt that could turn a free man into a servant, a slow and grinding process of repayment that could last a lifetime. They spoke of the talionus, the literal mirror of injury, where the state would replicate the harm done by the offender with clinical precision. These stories are not told to frighten the young, but to teach them about the weight of their actions, to instill in them a respect for the boundaries that keep the city from sliding into chaos. The repetition of these stories, passed down from father to son in the quiet hours of the night, is what gives the Roman people their strength and their stability. It is a slow, gradual accumulation of wisdom, a layering of experience that creates a foundation as solid as the volcanic rock upon which the city is built. As the lictor begins the downward arc of the rod, Quintus feels a sense of closure, a feeling that the day is finally, truly over, and that the order of the world has been successfully defended for another night. The wooden rod descends through the air with a slow, deliberate gravity, a dark line cutting through the orange glow of the torches. And when it meets its mark, the sound is a soft, muffled resonance that seems to vibrate through the very stones of the piazza. It is not a sharp sound, but a heavy one, a sound that speaks of the earth and the wood and the long, slow history of Roman discipline. Quintus feels the vibration in the soles of his feet, a rhythmic pulse that matches the steady beating of his own heart. The first stroke is followed by a long, quiet pause, a space of time where the only sound is the soft crackle of the burning olive oil in the lamps and the distant, rhythmic rushing of the Tiber river. The lictor draws the rod back with a movement that is as fluid as water, his arm moving in a perfect, repetitive arc that he has practiced 1,000 times before. There is no anger in the motion, no haste, and no emotion. It is simply the law expressing itself through the medium of the physical world. The second stroke falls, exactly like the first, a twin sound that reinforces the sense of an unfolding, inevitable cycle. Quintus watches the way the dust in the air dances in the wake of the rod's movement. Tiny golden motes swirling in a slow, hypnotic spiral before settling back down onto the shoulders of the silent watchers. The crowd remains perfectly still, a collection of statues draped in wool and linen, their shadows merging into one large, dark pool that stretches across the square. Everything is unfolding according to a pattern that was established long before any of them were born. A pattern that will continue long after the stones of this square have crumbled into sand. Quintus finds himself counting the strokes in his mind, not because he is eager for the end, but because the counting provides a rhythmic structure to the evening, a way of measuring the passage of time as the city drifts deeper into the night. 1, 2, 3. The numbers are soft and round in his thoughts, echoing the shape of the moon that is now rising over the rooftops of the Subura. The moon is a pale, silver disk, a silent witness to the restoration of order. Its light filtering down through the haze of wood smoke and dust to touch the edges of the fountain and the tops of the pillars, as the repetitive motion of the lictor continues. Quintus lets his mind drift away from the square, wandering down the long, shadowed corridors of Roman memory. He thinks about the different layers of the law, the way it reaches into every corner of a man's life, from the way he conducts his business to the way he serves in the legions. He thinks about the carcer, the dark, silent prisons like the Tullianum, where the air is cool and damp and the world above becomes a distant, fading memory. In the carcer, time does not move in the same way it does in the streets. It stretches and thins, becoming a long, continuous thread of shadow. To be imprisoned in Rome is not a punishment in itself, but a transition, a waiting period between the crime and the final resolution. Quintus imagines the prisoners sitting in the darkness, listening to the muffled sounds of the city far above them, the rumble of carts, the shouting of vendors, the splashing of fountains. Those sounds must seem like echoes from another world, a world of light and movement that they have stepped out of for a time. He thinks about the military punishments he has heard the older men discuss at the stone yard, the castigatio and the fustuarium. These are the punishments of the camp, the heavy, septic disciplined corrections that keep the great machine of the Roman army moving in perfect unison. He imagines a young soldier standing in the center of a military camp at dusk, much like the man in the square stands now. The air would be filled with the scent of leather and iron and cooking fires, and the sound of the correction would be echoed by the rhythmic marching of the sentries on the ramparts. In the army, the law is even more precise, even more rhythmic. It is a world of whistles and commands, of silver eagles and bronze breastplates, where every movement is calculated to maintain the strength of the whole. If a single link in the chain is weak, the law steps in to forge it anew, using the heat of discipline to temper the soul of the soldier. The flogging in the square is reaching its middle point now, a steady, hypnotic sequence of actions and pauses. Quintus watches the lictor's shadow on the wall behind him, a giant dark figure that mimics every movement with exaggerated grace. The shadow rod rises, the shadow rod falls, and the shadow lictor resets his stance with a slow, deliberate shift of his weight. It is like a shadow play performed for the gods, a silent drama that reinforces the invisible boundaries of the city. Quintus feels a deep, settling calm. The tension that usually lives in his shoulders, the product of a day spent wrestling with heavy blocks of travertine, is beginning to dissolve. He is being carried along by the rhythm of the event. A passenger on a slow-moving vessel that is navigating the calm waters of the Roman night. He thinks about the concept of misericordia, the idea of mercy that sometimes tempers the harshness of the law. Even in the most rigid systems, there is a place for the softening of the edge. A recognition that the goal is not destruction, but the preservation of the community. Sometimes, a magistrate might choose to reduce the number of strokes, or to replace a physical punishment with a fine or a period of public service. This, too, is part of the balance. The law is not a blind, unthinking force. It is a tool wielded by men who understand the value of harmony. Quintus watches a small bird, perhaps a swift, dart across the sky above the square. It is a tiny, dark arrow against the violet clouds, moving with a freedom that seems to contrast with the structured scene below. Yet, he knows that the bird, too, follows its own laws, the laws of the wind and the seasons and the sky. Everything in the universe is part of a grand, repeating design, a tapestry of actions and consequences that stretches out to the very edges of existence. The lictor pauses for a longer moment now, wiping a thin sheen of sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. The movement is slow and human, a brief break in the mechanical nature of the ritual. The man on the platform remains still, his breathing visible in the cool air as a faint, rhythmic mist. There is a sense of shared endurance between the two men, a quiet acknowledgement that they are both playing their parts in a story that is much larger than themselves. The crowd senses this pause and responds with a subtle shift in their own collective energy. The murmur of voices grows slightly softer, and the sound of the fountain seems to grow louder, filling the silence with its silver, liquid music. Quintus closes his eyes and lets the sound of the water wash over him. He imagines the water traveling through the great aqueducts, those massive, stone arteries that carry the lifeblood of the city from the distant mountains. The water moves with a steady, unyielding pressure, flowing over arches and through tunnels, always moving toward its destination. The law is the same. It is a force that flows through the city, providing structure and life, moving according to the gravity of tradition. He feels as though he is floating in that current, a small, peaceful leaf being carried along by the weight of history. He thinks about the centurion's vine staff, the vitis, which is used to maintain order in the ranks. It is a different kind of wood from the lictor's rods, but it serves the same purpose. It is a symbol of authority that is felt rather than just seen. He pictures the gnarled, twisted wood of the vine, its texture rough and ancient, a physical connection to the soil of Italy. In the Roman mind, there is a profound connection between the land and the law. The rules that govern the city are seen as an extension of the natural laws that govern the farm and the forest. To be Roman is to be rooted in the earth, to understand the cycles of planting and harvest, and to respect the boundaries of the field. The ritual in the square begins again, the rod resuming its slow, rhythmic descent. Quintus opens his eyes and watches the flickering light of the torches catch the polished surface of the magistrate's chair. The chair is made of ivory and wood, its curved legs forming a graceful X shape. It is a seat of power, but it is also a seat of responsibility. The man who sits in that chair must be the embodiment of the law, a calm and steady center in the middle of the city's constant movement. Quintus imagines what it must be like to sit there, to feel the weight of the city's expectations on your shoulders, to know that your words can change the course of a man's life. It is a heavy burden, one that requires a mind as clear and still as a mountain lake. He watches the magistrate's assistant, who stands next to the chair, his hands folded neatly inside his sleeves. The assistant's eyes are fixed on the horizon, watching the slow movement of the stars as they march across the sky. He is a timekeeper, a witness to the slow, unfolding history of the night. Quintus feels a sense of kinship with the man. They are both observers, both small parts of a vast and ancient system that provides them with a sense of place and purpose. The city around them is starting to fall into a deeper sleep. The distant sounds of the Subura are fading away, replaced by the soft, rhythmic breathing of the buildings themselves. The stones seem to sigh as they release the last of the day's heat, and the air grows crisper and more fragrant, with the scent of the night-blooming flowers that climb the walls of the nearby villas. The sound of the river is a constant, low-frequency hum that fills the ears and settles into the chest. A repetitive vibration that seems to pull the heat from the body and replace it with the cool, damp breath of the moving water. Quintus walks along the bank, his footsteps now softened by the patches of river silt and the tufts of dry grass that grow between the stones of the embankment. The water of the Tiber moves with a heavy, purposeful slow motion, its surface a dark mirror that catches the silver of the moon and the occasional flickering orange of a distant torch. As he moves further from the square, the memory of the lictor's rod begins to fold into the larger tapestry of the Roman night, becoming just another part of the city's ancient, rhythmic breathing. He passes a small landing where the grain barges are tied for the night, their thick hemp ropes creaking against the wooden pilings with a slow, steady groan, snap, groan. The sound is hypnotic, a back-and-forth motion that mirrors the swaying of the dark water. Near one of these barges, sitting on a stone bollard, is a man named Hilarus. Hilarus is a slave, a man whose entire existence is defined by the rhythm of another man's will. He is older than Quintus, his skin the color of well-worn leather, and his eyes fixed on the slow, swirling eddies of the river. Quintus stops for a moment, not to speak for the night is too heavy for many words, but simply to exist in the same quiet space. Hilarus represents the quiet, underlying tension that supports the entire structure of the Roman world. His life is a series of repetitive cycles, a clockwork of duties that begin before the sun has even considered rising and end long after it has disappeared. His routine is a steady, unyielding drumbeat, the hauling of water, the scrubbing of stone, the carrying of messages, the tending of the lamps. Each task is performed with a slow, deliberate care, for, in the life of a slave, the law is not a distant scroll in a plaza. It is the very air they breathe. The punishment of a slave is the foundation of the master's peace, a constant, unspoken weight that sits in the corners of every room and the shadows of every courtyard. Quintus watches Hilarus as the older man slowly rubs his wrist, a repetitive, circular motion that suggests an old ache, perhaps a memory of a chain or a heavy load. This is how control is maintained in Rome, not through constant violence, but through the slow, steady pressure of the inevitable. The fear of punishment is a quiet thing, a soft hum in the back of the mind that ensures the water is always carried and the stones are always clean. It is a detached, mechanical system of order. In the great houses of the city, the discipline is as structured as the architecture itself. Quintus thinks about the stories Hilarus has told him in the past, whispered over a shared piece of hard bread during the heat of the midday break. He thinks of the ergastulum, the private prison of the rural estates, where those who move too slowly or speak too loudly are kept in the cool, subterranean dark. It is not an emotional place. It is a place of correction, a way of recalibrating a human tool that has become slightly out of alignment with the master's needs. The repetition of these stories creates a sense of profound, dreamlike inevitability. To be a slave in Rome is to be a part of a vast, slow-moving machine, where your own heartbeat must eventually synchronize with the heartbeat of the house. Hilarus gazes at the water, and in his stillness, Quintus sees the reflection of 1,000 years of such lives, all flowing together like the river toward a sea that remains forever out of sight. The air is very still now, the breeze having settled into a faint, cool mist that clings to the surface of the Tiber. The smell of the water is green and ancient, a mixture of life and decay that has not changed. Since the first stones were laid on the Palatine Hill, everything in this moment is slow. The way Hilarus blinks his eyes, the way the river laps against the side of the barge slap, ripple, hiss, the way a single leaf drifts down from a nearby plane tree, circling slowly in the air before landing on the water and being carried away into the darkness. Quintus feels the weight of his own fatigue, a heavy, warm blanket that makes his limbs feel like the stone he cuts. He thinks about the furca, another punishment of the household, where a slave is made to carry a heavy wooden fork across their shoulders while being led through the streets. It is a slow walking lesson, a way of making the invisible weight of the law visible to all who pass. It is not a sudden thing. It is a lingering thing, a punishment measured in steps and hours. He imagines the sound of the wooden fork creaking against the neck, a rhythmic, repetitive sound that would eventually become the only thing the person could hear. This is the nature of Roman justice. It is a long, slow process of integration and correction, a way of ensuring that every part of the city, from the highest senator to the lowest slave, knows their place in the grand design. Hilarus finally stands up from the bollard. His movements are stiff and careful, as if he is afraid of disturbing the silence of the night. He nods slowly to Quintus, a gesture that is more about the shared acknowledgement of the darkness than a greeting. He begins to walk back toward the city, his steps echoing the same soft, rhythmic scuff that Quintus's sandals make. As they move away from the riverbank, the sound of the water begins to fade, replaced once again by the muffled, interior sounds of the city. The smell of the mist is replaced by the smell of wood smoke and old brick. They are approaching a large villa, its walls high and smooth, painted a deep, earthy red that looks almost black in the moonlight. Behind those walls, the machinery of the house is preparing for its own version of the evening's events. Quintus can see the light of several torches moving behind the upper windows, their glow appearing and disappearing as they pass behind the heavy linen curtains. There is a feeling in the air, a subtle vibration of anticipation. It is not an exciting feeling, but a heavy one, like the air before a summer storm. Somewhere within the walls of the city, another correction is being prepared. It might be a minor finger lashing for a broken jar, a period of standing in the corner for a forgotten message, but it is part of the same great, slow cycle. Quintus watches a group of guards move past them, their armor making a soft, rhythmic clink, clink, clink that sounds like the ticking of a very large, very slow clock. They are moving toward the barracks near the gate, their duty for the night almost done. Hilarus pauses near the service entrance of the villa, his hand resting for a moment on the cold iron of the door handle. He looks back at Quintus one last time, his face a mask of quiet, weary patience. He knows that tomorrow will be exactly like today, and that the day after will be the same, a long, repetitive sequence of actions and consequences that stretch out toward the horizon of his life. Quintus continues on his path, his own home now just a few streets away. He feels the dampness of the river mist on his skin, a cool reminder of the world he just left. He thinks about the law of the 12 tables again, and the way they were written in bronze so that they would never change, never warp, and never fade. They are the skeletal structure of the world, the hard bones beneath the soft flesh of the city. He passes a small shop where the owner is sleeping on a mat just inside the door, his breathing deep and rhythmic, a human echo of the city's pulse. Everything is settling. Everything is finding its place. The night is a vast, quiet ocean, and Quintus is drifting toward the shore of sleep. But even as he approaches his own door, he can feel the tension in the next street over, the gathering of the watchmen, the preparation of the leather straps, the slow, methodical arrangement of the space where the law will once again make itself known. The rhythm of the city is a heavy, slow-moving tide that pulls at the hem of Quintus's tunic as he walks. But as he moves further into the northern districts, the character of the silence begins to change. The air here is not filled with the chaotic, overlapping smells of the Subura, but with something more singular, more metallic, and more rigid. He is approaching the area near the Castra Praetoria, the great barracks where the heartbeat of the empire is regulated by the sound of the trumpet and the strike of the wooden staff. Here, the law does not just sit upon the shoulders of the people. It is the very skeleton of their existence. Quintus slows his pace even more, letting his sandals find the precise, square edges of the paving stones. He thinks about the soldiers who live behind those high, grey walls, men whose lives are a long, repeating sequence of drills, marches, and watches. For a soldier, the day is not a fluid thing that drifts from one task to another. It is a series of carved blocks of time, as solid and unyielding as the travertine Quintus cuts in the yard. Every movement is a repetition. The way they sharpen their iron blades scrape, hiss, scrape. The way they oil their leather larica rub, circle, rub. The way they stand at the gates, their eyes fixed on a point in the distance that never moves. In the military, the structure of authority is a ladder made of iron and tradition. Quintus imagines a young legionary, a man from the hills of Umbria, perhaps, who is currently standing on the ramparts. The soldier's breathing is slow and shallow in the cool night air, a rhythmic expansion and contraction that matches the pacing of the sentry 10 paces behind him. To this soldier, punishment is not an event. It is a possibility that lives in every crease of his uniform and every speck of dust on his shield. The Roman military survives on the precision of the collective, and any deviation from that precision is met with a correction that is as mechanical as the drill itself. Quintus thinks about the fustuarium, a punishment of the ranks where the law is enacted not by a single official, but by the very comrades the offender has let down. It is a slow, somber ritual of exclusion, a way of saying that the strength of the many is more important than the life of the one. He imagines the quiet, heavy atmosphere of the camp when such a thing is declared. There is no shouting. There is only the low, rhythmic thud of feet on the packed earth and the soft, repetitive clatter of wooden staves being gathered. It is a dreamlike process, a slow-motion restoration of the legion's integrity. The environment of the camp is one of total control. Every tent is in its place. Every spear is leaned at the same angle. Every fire is fed with the same amount of wood. This repetition creates a sense of profound, hypnotic security. Quintus feels this security even from outside the walls, a vibration of order that settles his own restless thoughts. He thinks of the decimatio, the most famous and most feared of all military corrections. It is a punishment of mathematics, a slow and terrible counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 10th man steps forward. It is not about individual guilt. It is about the collective responsibility of the unit. The Romans believed that the group is a single body, and if the body falters, a part of it must be sacrificed so the rest can survive. The counting is a rhythmic, repetitive act that strips away the individual and leaves only the law. Quintus imagines the silence that must fall over the ranks as the counting happens, a silence so deep that you can hear the rustle of the wind in the dry grass and the distant, lonely call of a hawk circling the camp. The authority of the centurion is represented by the vitis, the vine staff he carries. It is a gnarled, twisted piece of wood that has seen years of service. Quintus pictures the centurion walking down the rows of men, the staff tapping rhythmically against his leg. Tap, tap, tap. The sound is a reminder. It is a soft, constant pulse of discipline. If a soldier's posture is not correct, the staff provides a gentle, repetitive nudge. If a soldier is slow to wake, the staff provides a firm, rhythmic beat on the leather of the tent. It is a language of touch that every soldier understands. It is a way of communicating the expectations of the state without the need for many words. The military is a world of signs and sounds, of standards raised and lowered, of whistles that signal the start of the watch and the end of the meal. Everything is a cycle. Everything is a circle as the evening deepens. The shadows of the barracks walls grow so long they seem to swallow the road ahead. Quintus feels the temperature drop another degree. The cool air carrying the scent of wood smoke and old iron. He thinks about the missio ignominiosa, the dishonorable discharge, which is perhaps the slowest punishment of all. It is a long, lingering shame. A man is stripped of his belt, his sword, and his identity. He is made to walk out of the camp gates, leaving behind the only world he has known for 20 years. He becomes a ghost, a man without a place in the rhythmic order of the legion. Quintus watches a group of soldiers off duty, sitting near a small fire. They are not talking much. They are passing a cup of sour wine, their movements slow and synchronized, a reflection of the years they have spent moving as one. The firelight flickers on their faces, creating a repetitive pattern of light and dark that mimics the heartbeat of the camp. Everything in Rome is a matter of balance. The military provides the strength, the law provides the structure, and the people provide the life. Quintus feels like a small, quiet observer at the intersection of these forces. He thinks about the castigatio, the minor corrections that happen every day, the extra watch shifts, the cleaning of the latrines, the carrying of double rations on a long march. These are the small weights that keep the scales of discipline level. They are not dramatic. They are simply part of the routine, a repetitive series of tasks that remind the soldier that he is a servant of a larger purpose. Quintus takes a deep breath, the air tasting of the damp stone and the fading sun. He is almost home now, his own small room waiting for him with its familiar smells and its quiet stillness. The city is transitioning into its most peaceful state. The loud noises of the day are gone, replaced by the soft, rhythmic sounds of the night. The breathing of the soldiers behind the walls, the steady pacing of the sentries, the crackle of the watchfires, it all blends into a single, low-frequency hum that vibrates through the earth. Quintus feels his own heart slowing down to match this pulse. He is no longer thinking about the work of the day or the worries of tomorrow. He is simply existing in the long, slow flow of Roman history. The sky above is a vast indigo dome, the stars now bright and steady, like the silver studs on a general's cloak. He pauses one last time before turning into his own street, looking back at the silhouette of the barracks against the night sky. It is a monument to order, a silent guardian of the city's peace. He thinks about the concept of disciplina, a word that sounds like the steady beat of a drum. It is the force that turned a small village on the Tiber into the master of the world. It is a force that is felt in the weight of the stone, the flow of the water, and the rhythm of the march. As he finally reaches his door, the latch makes a soft, familiar click. He steps inside, the darkness of his room wrapping around him like a heavy, warm cloak. The world outside continues its slow, repetitive dance, the law and the military and the city all moving in perfect, quiet unison. He settles onto his sleeping mat, his limbs heavy and relaxed, his mind drifting toward the deep, dreamless sleep of a man who knows his place in the world. The last thing he hears is the distant, rhythmic call of a sentry on the wall, a sound that tells the city that all is well. All is quiet, and the order of Rome remains unbroken. The latch of the door is a small, silver sound in the deep velvet of the room, and as Quintus settles onto his sleeping mat, the silence of the city becomes a living thing, a heavy and soft presence that breathes with him. He lies there in the darkness, his limbs feeling like the very stones he has spent the day shaping, and his mind begins to drift toward the quietest corners of Roman law, punishments that do not use the rod or the axe, but instead use the weight of time and the coldness of space. He thinks about the relegatio, the quiet exile, where a man is not physically harmed, but is simply told that he no longer belongs to the rhythm of Rome. It is a slow, unfolding correction. The man is given a date, a destination, and a boundary that he must never cross again. Quintus imagines what it must be like to walk out of the city gates for the last time, hearing the familiar sounds of the fountains and the carts fading into a distant, ghostly hum. The exile moves toward a lonely shore or a quiet mountain village, where the language is strange and the stones are unfamiliar. It is a punishment of silence, a repetitive counting of days in a place where the heart does not recognize the horizon. In the mind of a Roman, to be removed from the city is to be removed from the light. Quintus thinks about the aquae eti ignis, interdictio, the interdiction of water and fire. It is a social vanishing. The community simply ceases to see the individual. No one offers a cup of water. No one shares the warmth of a hearth. The person becomes a ghost walking among the living, a shadow that moves through the market without a sound. This exclusion is as rhythmic and steady as the tides of the sea. It is a slow, cold pulling away of the fabric of society, leaving the individual standing alone in a vast, empty expanse of existence. Quintus feels the peace of his own room, the way the walls hold the memories of his family and the scent of his own life. And he realizes that the greatest weight the law can impose is the weight of being forgotten. He thinks of the poet Ovid, sent away to the cold edges of the Black Sea, writing letters that traveled for months across the waves, seeking a connection to a world that had moved on without him. The repetition of the waves hitting the shore-hissed retreat. His becomes the only clock the exile knows. He shifts his weight slightly, the straw of his mat rustling with a dry, rhythmic sound that reminds him of the parchment in the magistrate's hand. His thoughts move deeper into the earth, down to the Tullianum, the lower chamber of the Mamertine prison. There, the punishment is not movement, but the total absence of it. It is a room of cold, basalt, and absolute shadow. In the carcer, time does not flow like a river. It pools like stagnant water in a dark cavern. Quintus imagines a prisoner sitting in that stillness, listening to the slow, repetitive drip of water from the ceiling. Plink, pause, plink. Each drop is a second, each second is a minute, and each minute is an eternity of reflection. The prison is not meant for long-term stay, but for the quiet interval before the end, a place where the soul is allowed to settle into the gravity of its choices. The air in such a place is heavy and damp, tasting of salt and ancient dust. It is a controlled environment of sensory deprivation, where the only thing the prisoner can truly feel is the texture of the stone and the rhythm of their own breathing. This isolation is a mirror held up to the crime. If a man has tried to place himself above the law places him below the earth. It is a symmetrical response, a slow and methodical balancing of the scales. Quintus finds the thought strangely comforting in its predictability. There is no chaos in Roman punishment. There is only the application of a known formula. He thinks about the infamia again, the loss of status that follows certain crimes. It is a stain that cannot be washed away, a repetitive whispering that follows a man into every shop and every bathhouse. Even if he stays in Rome, he is no longer part of the Roman story. He is a footnote, a blurred line in the census, a man who walks the streets but is never truly there. The silence that greets such a man is a rhythmic, social punishment, a wall of glass that separates him from the warmth of the collective. The night is reaching its deepest point, that hour when the stars seem to stop their movement and the earth holds its breath. Quintus feels his thoughts becoming thinner and more transparent, like the mist rising off the Tiber. He thinks about the quiet discipline of the Vestal virgins, whose lives are a continuous, repetitive ritual of tending the sacred fire. For them, the law is a protective circle, but if that circle is broken, the punishment is the ultimate silence, to be buried alive in a small chamber with only a lamp, a loaf of bread, and a jug of water. It is the most profound form of isolation, a slow returning to the womb of the earth while the heart still beats. He imagines the silence of that chamber, a silence so thick it can be felt against the skin. The flame of the lamp would dance rhythmically until the oil ran dry, and then there would be only the dark and the steady, quiet passage of time. Everything is slow. Everything is repetitive. The way the moon moves across the patch of sky visible through his small window. The way the shadows of the rafters shift across the floor. The way the distant call of a night bird repeats its two-note song hoot across the rooftops. Quintus lets these rhythms wash over him, filling the hollow spaces of his fatigue. He is a stonecutter, a man who understands that the most significant changes happen through the slow, repetitive application of pressure. A mountain is moved one grain at a time. A life is corrected one stroke at a time. A city is governed one law at a time. The quiet punishments of Rome are the expressions of this truth. They are the slow, steady grind of the millstones of justice, turning so slowly that the movement is almost invisible, yet so surely that nothing can escape them. The air in the room begins to change. The absolute blackness of the night is starting to soften into a deep charcoal grey. It is the first faint hint of the approach of the morning. the silence is different now. It is no longer the heavy silence of the midnight watch, but the expectant, thin silence of the pre-dawn. Quintus watches the edge of his window, waiting for the first touch of the light. He thinks about the people who will wake up today in exile, or in the dark of a cell, or in the shadow of social exclusion. They too are watching the light change, even if they cannot see the sun. They are part of the same rhythm, the same long, boring history of order and consequence. The light grows a fraction brighter, turning the grey to a soft, bruised violet. The textures of the room begin to emerge from the shadows. The grain of the wooden stool, the weave of his cloak, the smooth surface of the water in his ceramic cup. Everything is still. Not a single bird has yet begun its morning song. Not a single cart has started its journey through the streets. The city is held in a perfect, crystalline moment of peace. Quintus feels his heart beat one more slow, steady time, and he closes his eyes as the first pale sliver of gold touches the very top of the highest hill. The night of the law is fading, and the day of the city is about to begin, but for now, there is only the stillness, the repetition of his breath, and the deep, enduring calm of the eternal city. The first pale sliver of gold touches the very top of the highest hill, and the light begins to spill downward, not in a rush, but in a slow, honey-like flow that fills the crevices of the city's stone face. Quintus rises from his mat, his movements stiff and rhythmic, a series of practiced gestures that have not changed in all the years of his apprenticeship. He washes his face with the water from the ceramic jar, the liquid cool and flat against his skin, a repetitive splashing that marks the true beginning of his day. He steps out of his room and back into the streets, but today he does not head toward the river or the stone yard. His feet, guided by a quiet and heavy curiosity, lead him toward the outskirts of the city, toward the open spaces where the air is thinner and the shadows of the great monuments stretch out like the fingers of a sleeping giant. The city is still mostly silent, a vast and cooling lung that is just beginning to draw its first waking breath. As he walks, the environment shifts from the cramped, timber-framed heights of the Subura to the wider, more echoing expanses of the public squares. He finds himself moving toward the campus the field of Mars. Here, the grass is still damp with the morning dew, a silver carpet that muffins the sound of his steps. The air smells of wet earth and the faint, lingering scent of last night's watchfires. In this open space, the law takes on a different character. It is not the law of the household or the law of the ranks, but the law of the public spectacle. Quintus pauses near a large, circular depression in the earth, a place where the soil has been packed hard by the passage of countless feet. He thinks about the Noxi, those who have been condemned and are brought here not for a quick correction, but for a slow and public transition out of the world of the living. He thinks about the damnatio ad bestias, the condemnation to the beasts, but he does not think of it with the roar of a crowd or the flash of a tooth. He thinks of it as a quiet, administrative process. He imagines the cages being moved on heavy wooden roller screek. Thud, creak, and the slow, repetitive pacing of the animals within. Their rhythmic movements, a reflection of the captive's own heartbeat to the Roman mind. The arena is a place of purification. It is where the chaos of the criminal is consumed by the order of the state. Quintus watches a group of laborers setting up a wooden barrier near the edge of the field. They move with a weary, synchronized slowness, their hammers hitting the stakes with a rhythmic tink. Tink, tink, that carries far in the morning still. This is the preparation for the tunica molesta, a punishment rarely spoken of in the markets, but known in the quiet whispers of the evening. It is a garment of papyrus or coarse linen, soaked in pitch and wax, designed to be a slow and luminous end. Quintus imagines the texture of the wax, thick and smooth, and the way it would feel under a thumb. It is a punishment of light and heat, a way of turning a person into a flickering torch that illuminates the power of the emperor. But even this, in his mind, is softened by the distance of history. He sees it as a sequence of chemical reactions, a slow melting and a steady glow that eventually fades into the grey ash of the morning. He continues his walk, moving past the great stone arches that mark the boundary between the city and the world beyond. The light is stronger now, turning the white marble of the nearby temples into a brilliant, aching cream color. He thinks about the stigma, the branding of the flesh, often reserved for those who have tried to flee their assigned place in the Great Order. It is a mark that never heals, a repetitive reminder that is carried on the forehead or the hand for the rest of one's days. The iron is heated in a small charcoal brazier crackle, hiss. Blown, the mark is applied with a quick, clinical precision. To Quintus, the mark is like the mason's mark he carves into the base of a pillar. It is a sign of ownership, a way of saying that this piece of the world belongs to a specific structure and must not be moved. The branding is a silent, permanent law, a law that is whispered by the skin every time the sun hits it. The outskirts of Rome are a landscape of transitions. Here, the tombs of the great families line the roads, their stone faces watching the travelers with a detached, eternal gaze. The law of the dead is as complex as the law of the living. Quintus passes a monument that has been defaced, the names chiseled away until only a rough, scarred surface remains. This is the damnatio memoria, the condemnation of memory. It is perhaps the slowest and most thorough of all Roman punishments. It is the rhythmic, systematic removal of a person from the fabric of time. One by one, their statues are toppled. One by one, their names are scraped from the bronze tablets. One by one, their images are painted over in the frescoes of the villas. It is a slow, quiet erasing, a way of making it so that the person never existed at all. Quintus thinks about the laborers who are hired to do this work, the men with the chisels and the scrapers who spend their days in the repetitive task of unmaking a life. Scrape, dust, scrape. It is a boring mechanical job, but it is the ultimate expression of the state's power to control the past, as well as the present. The sun is now fully above the horizon, but it is a pale, watery sun that does not yet provide much warmth. Quintus feels a deep, hollow tiredness in his chest. His walk has been long, and the weight of the city's many laws feels as though it is pressing down on his very thoughts. He thinks about the lex, Julia, and the punishments for those who betray the sanctity of the marriage bed. He imagines the quiet, heavy atmosphere of a household where an exile is being prepared. The soft packing of clothes, the hushed conversations in the atrium, the slow closing of the heavy oak doors. Everything is a cycle of opening and closing, of gathering and dispersing. He feels a sense of mental distance, as though he is watching his own life from a high, silent balcony. The people he passes, the farmers bringing their produce to market, the slaves sweeping the steps of the temples seem like figures in a dream, moving in a slow, repetitive dance that has no beginning and no end. He finds a stone bench near a cluster of cypress trees and sits down. The trees are tall and dark, their branches moving only slightly in the morning breeze. The sound of the wind through the needles is a constant, soft she, a repetitive sound that lulls his mind into a state of quiet abstraction. He thinks about the cullius again, and the way the leather of the sack would feel as it was stitched shut. He thinks about the weight of the water as it pulled the sack down into the depths. He thinks about the silence of the riverbed. It all feels so far away, so detached from the heat and the dust of his daily life. He is a stonecutter, a man of the earth, and yet he feels as though he is made of nothing but shadows and memories. His mind wanders to the metallum, the condemnation to the mines. This is a punishment of pure repetition. A man is sent into the dark bowels of the earth to swing a pick against the rock, hour after hour, day after day, until his body becomes a part of the mountain itself. Thud, clink, thud. The sound is the only thing that exists in the darkness. The smell is of damp stone and stale air and the metallic temps of the ore. There is no escape from the rhythm of the work. It is a slow, grinding consumption of a life, a way of turning a human being into a source of raw material for the empire. Quintus feels the ghost of that pickaxe in his own hands, the weight of the wood and the bite of the iron. He realizes that in a way, everyone in Rome is working in a mine of their own making, following the repetitive patterns of their status and their duty until the light finally goes out. The tiredness in his limbs is now matched by a tiredness in his soul. He has spent the night and the morning walking through the layers of the Roman law, and he finds that the law is not a thing of justice or of anger, but a thing of infinite, boring patience. It is a machine that never sleeps, a clock that never stops ticking, a river that never stops flowing. He closes his eyes and leans his head back against the cool bark of the cypress tree. The world around him continues its slow, rhythmic movement. The birds have begun to chirp in the branches above him, a repetitive two-note song that repeats every few seconds. A cart rumbles in the distance, the wheels hitting the stones with a steady, predictable thud-thud. Quintus lets these sounds carry him further away from the city, further away from the law, and further away from himself. He is a small, quiet point in a vast and ancient landscape, a single grain of sand in the great hourglass of Rome. He feels a slight warmth on his eyelids as the sun moves higher, but he does not open them. He is content to stay in this state of mental distance, a place where the punishments of the past and the routines of the present all blend into a single, grey and peaceful blur. The history of Rome is a long, slow story told in stone and blood and silence, and he is just a listener who has become too tired to hear the end. The morning light continues to grow, illuminating the field and the tombs and the distant walls of the city. But for Quintus, there is only the repetition of his breath and the deep, enduring stillness of a mind that has travelled too far. The stone bench is cool, and the shadow of the cypress tree moves with a glacial, imperceptible shift, marking the slow passage of a morning that feels as though it has no beginning and no end. Quintus sits in the centre of this stillness, his mind a quiet vessel for the drifting images of the city, a series of vignettes that flow into one another like different currents in the same deep, dark river. He finds himself no longer walking, but merely observing the internal landscape of the Roman order, a landscape where the law is a repeating pattern of light and shadow, of action and consequence, and of a silence that is as heavy as a burial shroud. He sees, in the theatre of his thoughts, a man standing in the centre of the forum during the high heat of midday. The man is not being struck, nor is he being led away. He is simply wearing a sign around his neck, a wooden board with letters carved deep into the grain. The letters tell a story of a small theft, a minor betrayal of the public trust, People walk past him in a slow, rhythmic stream, their sandals clashing softly on the marble. Some look, some do not, but the man remains as still as a statue, a living monument to his own era. The repetition of the footstep, scrip, clack becomes the only clock he has. A steady, boring count of the hours he must spend as a visible warning to the city. The image shifts, dissolving at the edges like a cloud in a summer sky. And now the scene is a quiet courtyard in a villa on the Aventon Hill. The air is thick with the scent of blooming oleander and the damp, metallic smell of a lead water pipe. A young girl, a slave whose duty it was to tend the mistress's hair, stands in the corner of the peristyle. She is holding a heavy bronze mirror above her head, her arms trembling with a slow, rhythmic vibration. This is the punishment of the stare, the command to remain motionless. It is a quiet, domestic correction, a way of turning a human being into a piece of furniture. The sun moves across the tiled floor, a square of gold that travels inch by inch, and the girl watches it with a detached, weary focus. Every muscle in her shoulders is a dull, repeating ache, a silent scream that is muffled by the absolute decorum of the house. To the mistress, who sits nearby reading a scroll, the girl is not a person in pain. She is a tilted pillar that must be straightened through the application of time and gravity. The water in the central pool ripples in a constant, hypnotic pattern drip circle. Fade and the girl's life is consumed by the sheer, repetitive effort of existing without moving. The scene flows onward, drifting through the stone walls and into the outskirts again, where the road is lined with the tall, silent shapes of the tombs. Here, a group of men is working on a public project, their ankles joined by a long, heavy iron chain. The chain is a musical instrument of the law, a rhythmic clinking that accompanies every movement. Clink, shuffle, clink. They are digging a trench for a new drainage pipe, their shovels entering the earth with a soft, repetitive shush, and leaving with a heavy thud. They do not speak. The heat of the sun is a weight on their backs, a physical manifestation of the state's displeasure. One man pauses to wipe the sweat from his eyes, and the entire line must pause with him, the chain tightening and then slackening with a soft, metallic sigh. This is the vincula, the bondage that turns a group of individuals into a single, slow-moving organism of labor. Quintus watches them from the distance of his memory, seeing the way their shadows merge into one long, jagged line on the dusty ground. A line that represents the unbreakable connection between the crime and the dead. The dream shifts again, moving back toward the heart of the city, into the halls of the great law courts. The air here is cooler, smelling of old parchment and the expensive incense burned in the nearby shrines. A man is being led out of the side door, his head covered by a dark cloak. He has been sentenced to deportatio, a more severe form of exile where his property is confiscated and his citizenship is stripped away. He is moving toward the docks, toward a ship that will take him to a rocky island in the middle of the Aegean Sea. The sound of his footsteps on the polished stone is a final, rhythmic goodbye to the world he knew. Step, hollow, step. He will spend the rest of his years watching the same blue horizon, hearing the same repetitive crash of the waves against the basalt cliffs, and eating the same salt-crusted bread. It is a punishment of endless, beautiful monotony, a way of drowning a life in the sheer scale of the sea. Quintus feels the spray of that distant salt water on his own face, a cool and ghost-like sensation that makes him shiver in the warmth of the morning sun. Now the flow of the narrative takes him to a small, dark room in a neighborhood he does not recognize. A man is sitting at a wooden table, his hands tied behind his back. Before him stands a low-ranking official holding a small, sharp instrument. This is the nota sensoria, the branding of the reputation. The official is not cutting the man's skin. He is marking a document, a public record that will follow the man for the rest of his life. The sound of the reed pen scratching across the parchment is a small, sharp, repetitive noise, scritch, scritch, scritch. With every stroke, the man standing in the community is eroded. He will no longer be allowed to sit in the front rows of the theatre. He will no longer be invited to the dinners of his peers. He will no longer be a part of the vibrant, rhythmic life of the Roman elite. He is being moved to the periphery, a slow and silent transition into the shadows. The official blows on the ink to dry it, a soft, repetitive sound like the wind through the cypress needles. And the man's fate is sealed in the silence of the archive. Quis feels himself drifting further away, the scenes becoming more blurred, the transitions more fluid. He sees a soldier being forced to stand outside the general's tent for an entire night, holding a heavy pack filled with stones. He sees a merchant being forced to return 3 times the value of a salted fish he sold under false pretenses. The coins clicking rhythmically as they are counted out onto a stone counter, clink, clink, clink. He sees a woman being forbidden from wearing the stola, the garment of the respectable matron, and instead being forced to wear the dark toga of the disgraced. The repetition of the fabric as she walks swish, rustle swishes a constant reminder of the boundary she crossed. All of these things are happening at once, and they have been happening for centuries. And they will continue to happen as long as the stones of Rome remain stacked one upon the other. The law is not an event. It is a climate. It is the weather of the soul. He feels a profound sense of withdrawal from his surroundings. The sounds of the morning, the birds, the distant carts, the rustle of the trees begin to pull back, becoming a thin silver thread of noise that is easily ignored. He is no longer Quintus, the stonecutter. He is merely a point of awareness in a vast, cooling universe of history. The tiredness in his limbs has moved into his very breath, making each inhalation a slow and deliberate act of will. He watches the way the light hits a single blade of grass near his sandal, seeing the microscopic droplets of dew clinging to the green surface. The droplets are perfect spheres, reflecting a tiny, distorted version of the entire world. They stay there, suspended and still, until the heat of the rising sun eventually turns them into mist. The city of Rome, with all its noise and its blood and its complex, strange punishments, feels like a story that someone else is telling. A long and boring story that is finally reaching its quietest chapter. Quintus leans his head further back against the tree, letting his eyes close completely. The orange glow of the sun through his eyelids is a warm and steady presence, a repetitive pulse of light that tells him the world is still there, even if he is no longer a part of it. He feels the gravity of the earth pulling at him, a soft and welcoming force that promises the deep, dreamless sleep he has been seeking. The law, the military, the slaves, the forum, it all fades into a single, low-frequency hum, a sound like the hive of the universe settling down for the night. He is no longer thinking. He is no longer remembering. He is simply drifting, a small and peaceful speck of dust in the long, slow, and repetitive history of the dark. The orange glow against his closed eyelids is a steady, rhythmic pulse, a warm vibration that feels like the heartbeat of the earth itself. And Quintus lets himself sink deeper into the soft, velvet silence of his own mind. He is no longer looking at the streets, or the soldiers, or the slaves, or the stoneyard. He is looking at the invisible threads that hold them all together, the long, slow, and repetitive lines of the law that trace their way through the dust of the city. He thinks about how the weight of the Roman order is not a burden that is picked up and put down, but a constant atmosphere, a pressure that shapes the way a man stands, the way he speaks, and the way he breathes. To be Roman is to be part of a vast, slow-moving architecture of consequence. Every action is a pebble dropped into a deep, still pond, and the ripples move outward in perfect, predictable circles until they touch the very edges of the world. He reflects, with a calm and detached mind, on the way the fear of the rod and the shadow of the exile's ship have become the very mortar between the bricks of the city. It is a quiet, underlying presence. It is the reason the baker measures his grain with a slow and steady hand. It is the reason the merchant counts his coins with a rhythmic metal clink, clink, clink. It is the reason the night watchman walks his rounds with a heavy, predictable step. The law is the silence between the words. It is the space between the heartbeats. It is the invisible boundary that keeps the city from spilling over into the chaos of the wilderness. Quintus feels this boundary within himself, a soft and steady tether that keeps his thoughts from drifting too far into the darkness. The society of Rome is a garden that is tended with a clinical, repetitive patience. The weeds are pulled, the branches are pruned, and the soil is turned. Over and over, season after season, century after century. The punishments he has witnessed, the floggings, the chains, the brandons, the silences, are merely the tools of the gardener. They are used to maintain the shape of the hedge and the path of the water. There is no anger in the tool. There is only the purpose. Quintus imagines the great census takers, the men who sit in the quiet halls and record the lives of millions on long rolls of parchment. Their pens move with a rhythmic, scratching sound. Scritch, pause. Scritches. They categorize the world into the worthy and the unworthy, the citizen and the stranger, the free and the bound. This administrative stillness is the true heart of the empire. It is a world of lists and numbers, of categories and consequences, where every life is a small, quiet entry in a book that never ends. He feels a profound passivity washing over him, a sense that he is no longer a participant in the story, but merely a witness to the unfolding of a natural law. The city of Rome is a mountain, and he is a single grain of sand sitting on its slopes. The mountain does not care if he stays or if he goes. It only cares that the gravity remains constant. He thinks about the Pax Romana, the great peace that stretches across the sea and the land. It is a peace built on the repetitive application of discipline. It is a peace of the sword in the scabbard and the rod in the bundle. It is a heavy, quiet peace that allows the farmer to plough his field and the mason to lay his stone, knowing that the rhythm of the world will not be broken. Quintus feels this peace in his own limbs, a weight that is both comforting and absolute. His thoughts become more fragmented, more dreamlike, as the warmth of the sun penetrates deeper into his skin. He thinks of the sacra, the sacred rites that must be performed with exact, repetitive precision. If a priest stumbles over a word, the ritual must begin again. If a flame goes out, the balance is tilted. The law of the gods is the same as the law of the men. It is a matter of maintaining the rhythm. He hears the phantom sound of a temple bell, a low, bronze vibration that echoes through the hollow spaces of his memory. Bong, fade, bong, fade. The sound is a reminder that the universe is watching, that the eyes of the ancestors are fixed on the present. and that the chain of duty must never be broken. He is drifting now, moving further away from the physical reality of the cypress tree and the stone bench. He is in a place of pure abstraction, where the punishments of Rome are seen as geometric patterns, as lines of force that intersect and diverge in a vast, silent space. He sees the exile as a point moving away from a center. He sees the prisoner as a point held in a fixed position. He sees the soldier as a series of points moving in a straight, unwavering line. It is a beautiful, cold, and boring vision of order. There is no pain in this geometry. There is only the elegance of the equation. The state is the mathematician, and the people are the numbers. And the result is always the same. The preservation of the whole. The repetition of these thoughts acts as a lullaby, a slow and steady drone that pulls him toward the final threshold of consciousness. He thinks about the word Constantia, the Roman virtue of steadiness, of remaining unchanged in the face of the storm. It is the quality of the stone. It is the quality of the law. It is the quality of the night. He feels himself becoming more constant, more still, more like the basalt paving stones that have waited for centuries for the sun to rise. The world around him is a blur of soft colors and muted sounds. The birds are still chirping, but their voices are like distant flutes. The wind is still blowing, but it is like a soft silk ribbon being pulled across his skin. He feels a total emotional distance from the events of the night. The man in the square, the girl with the mirror, the soldiers in the barracks, they are all part of a long, slow play that he has seen many times before. Their struggles and their corrections are merely the movements of the gears in a very large clock. He does not feel pity, and he does not feel fear. He only feels the quiet, heavy satisfaction of knowing that the clock is still ticking. The balance is maintained. The debt is paid. The city is safe. The stillness within him is now absolute. It is the stillness of the deep ocean, where the light of the sun does not reach, and the movement of the waves is not felt. He is a part of the quiet history of the earth, a history that is written in the slow accumulation of dust and the gradual wearing away of the stone. He is no longer Quintus. He is the breath of the city, the shadow of the pillar, the memory of the law. The early morning light is a pale, silver wash that covers everything in a layer of peace. There is no movement in the field. There is no movement in the trees. The world is a perfect, silent sculpture of itself. He lets out a long, slow breath, and with it, the last of his connections to the waking world dissolve. He is sinking into a deep, dreamless indigo, a place where the rules and the routines of Rome are finally set aside. The history of the punishments, the strange and the brutal and the unusual, has served its purpose. It has provided the rhythm, it has provided the structure, and now it provides the silence. The city is asleep, the law is at rest, and Quintus is finally, beautifully, alone in the deep, repetitive stillness of the dark. The stillness is now a vast and weightless sea, and Quintus feels himself floating upon its surface, a small and quiet point of awareness that is slowly, rhythmically dissolving into the cooling air of the Roman morning. The sky above the Campus Martis has transitioned from a bruised violet to a pale, translucent silver, a color so soft and so thin that it seems to breathe with the same slow cadence as the trees. There is no movement in the grass. There is no movement in the shadows. The entire world is held in a state of perfect, crystalline suspension, a moment of history that has been paused and smoothed over by the passage of 1,000 quiet nights. Quintus lets his hands rest palm up on the cool stone of the bench, his fingers curling naturally and slowly, as if they are letting go of the heavy tools and the hard edges of the day's labor. He is no longer thinking of the stone yard, or the clink of the chisel, or the weight of the travertine. He is thinking of the silence that exists between the grains of the stone, the deep and enduring peace that remains when the work is finally done. The thoughts that drift through his mind are no longer sharp or defined. They are like the faint, trailing edges of wood smoke that rise from a dying fire, curling and thinning and vanishing into the grey light. He reflects on the law one last time, but not as a set of rules or a system of punishments. He reflects on it as a soft and steady hum, a background vibration that ensures the sun will rise and the water will flow and the city will remain. It is a comforting repetition. It is a slow and predictable rhythm. He thinks of the way the Roman streets are laid out in their orderly grids, a repetitive pattern of squares and lines that provides a home for the wandering soul. He thinks of the way the seasons return with a weary and beautiful certainty, the heat of the summer, the rains of the autumn, the cool clarity of the winter, and the soft blooming of the spring. Everything is a cycle. Everything is a circle. Everything returns to the center, and the center is always still. He feels a fading awareness of his own body, a sense that he is becoming as light as the dust motes dancing in the pale morning air. The weight of his limbs, which had been so heavy and so tired, is now a distant memory, a soft and fading echo of a life that is currently at rest. He listens to the silence of the outskirts, a silence that is composed of many small and quiet things. He hears the soft, repetitive rustle of a single leaf on the cypress tree hiss. Pause, hiss. He hears the faint rhythmic ticking of a cooling stone nearby. He hears the slow and steady intake of his own breath, a sound that is becoming indistinguishable from the breathing of the earth itself. There is no rush to reach the end of the thought. There is no need to find a resolution. The story of Rome is a story without a final page, a long and boring and beautiful narrative that continues to flow even when the listener has fallen into a deep and peaceful sleep. The light is changing again, becoming a soft and warm gold that touches the tops of the distant tombs. It is a gentle light. It is a kind light. It does not demand anything from the world. It simply exists, a quiet witness to the enduring nature of the Roman soul. Quintus feels a sense of profound emotional distance from everything he has seen and everything he has felt. The floggings in the square, the soldiers on the walls, the slaves in the courtyards, they are all part of the same slow-moving tapestry, a repetitive weave of shadow and light that has been smoothed over by the heavy hand of time. He is no longer judging, and he is no longer wondering. He is simply being carried along by the slow and steady current of the morning. A leaf on the Tiber, a grain of sand on the shore, a heartbeat in the silence of the eternal city. Everything is slowing down even further now. The words in his mind are becoming shorter, softer, trailing off like the scent of jasmine on a dying breeze. He thinks of the word quies, the quiet rest, the cessation of labor, the stillness of the heart. It is a word that sounds like a sigh. It is a word that feels like a blanket. He lets the word repeat in his thoughts, a slow and rhythmic chant that pulls him down, deeper and deeper, into the soft and indigo depths of the night's end. Quies, quies, quies. The world around him is a blur of silver and gold and grey, a soft and muted palette that is easy on the eyes and easy on the soul. There is no movement. There is no sound. There is only the deep and enduring calm of a world that is safe, a world that is ordered, and a world that is finally, beautifully, at rest. The history of the punishments, the strange and the unusual and the brutal, has all faded into a single, low-frequency hum that is no longer heard, only felt as a soft vibration in the earth. It is the sound of the world turning. It is the sound of time passing. It is the sound of the city breathing in its sleep. Quintus closes his eyes for the final time, and the orange glow of the sun through his eyelids is replaced by a deep and perfect darkness, a velvet void that is warm and welcoming and filled with the promise of a dreamless peace. He is no longer walking. He is no longer watching. He is no longer Quintus. He is the silence of the stones. He is the rhythm of the river. He is the long and boring and beautiful history of the night. And as the morning light grows stronger, he drifts away, further and further, into the soft and repetitive stillness of the dark. And the city remains, and the law remains, and the peace remains, and everything is as it should be, slow and steady and still, as the light begins to touch the marble of the forum a mile away. The silence here remains unbroken. The trees do not move. The grass does not stir. The shadows linger for a moment longer, before they too begin their slow and rhythmic retreat. And the world is quiet, and the air is still, and the sleep is deep, and the journey is over. For now, in the heart of Rome, in the cooling stone, in the fading light, in the soft and trailing memory of the day, everything is quiet, and everything is still.